My name is Laura, and this year I'm turning 33, reflecting on my journey so far. It's hard to believe how much has changed in just over a decade. After graduating from college, I landed a job with a well-known corporation, the kind almost everyone recognizes. The pay was decent, even for a newcomer like me, which was a big relief. But as with all things that seemed too good to be true, there was a catch. Soon, I found myself traveling for business or training nearly half the month. Overtime became the norm, and working on holidays was expected. It was tough, no doubt, but I felt a sense of accomplishment in my work, something that kept me motivated even on the hardest days. Subscribe to the channel and click on the notification. Help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers. This way YouTube will deliver this content to more people who will benefit. I count on your help. When I turned 27, I had already climbed up the ranks to become a department head, an impressive achievement, especially for a woman in a corporate environment. 5 years ago, I married my boyfriend, Sam. We met through a mutual friend, and at the time, I wasn't particularly looking for a relationship. Concerned about my well-being, my friend thought I needed a push, so she introduced us. I never really had a strong desire to marry. In fact, often imagined living my whole life as a single woman. But Sam was different. From the beginning, he was clear about wanting to get married soon. He also talked about wanting kids, insisting it would be harder to raise them as we got older. At that point, I had no interest in having children. The idea of marriage seemed absurd, especially since we didn't know each other that well. I had just been promoted, and my focus was on my career, not starting a family. Whenever Sam brought up marriage, I gently pushed back, saying things like, "You're rushing things. We need to get to know each other better." To this, Sam would offer a compromise. "Okay, let's date for 2 years. By then, we'll know each other well enough, right?" Honestly, I didn't think we'd last those 2 years, but surprisingly, we did. We dated for those 2 years and then got married. During our relationship, Sam was loyal. He wasn't into gambling, and he treated me kindly. I saw him as a hardworking person, dedicated to his job, which I respected. However, one thing always bothered me, his ego. Whenever a more experienced colleague pointed out a mistake he'd made, he'd come home complaining, insisting I did what I thought was best. They're just bossy. I don't need anyone telling me what to do. Listening to him made it clear he was being criticized for his mistakes, but he seemed incapable of handling constructive feedback. It was disheartening to see how he reacted to criticism, whether it came from a superior or anyone else. When the time came for us to introduce our families, we decided to have dinner together. For some reason, Sam chose a restaurant that charged over $200 per person. When he suggested that I pay half of the bill, I was taken aback. This place is really expensive. Can't we find something more reasonable? I suggested, hoping to make things easier for both of us. But Sam insisted, this is important. If I pick a cheap place, they'll think I'm stingy. I can't let that happen. In that moment, I realized how much he prioritized appearances over practicality. He explained, I can't afford to pay for 8 people with my salary. Maybe I could cover 3, but I need your help for the rest. I felt frustrated. We had 4 people from each family, making a total of 8, and there was Sam suggesting an expensive restaurant despite knowing he couldn't cover his own family's share. Despite my discomfort, I stayed quiet. I didn't want to cause a scene, so I reluctantly agreed to pay more than half. When we finally met at the restaurant, I watched as Sam confidently told everyone, "Don't worry about the bill today. I've got it covered." His cheerful demeanor masked my inner turmoil. Everyone seemed happy, and I thought it best to let him take charge of the situation. Even so, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Looking back, I wish I had spoken up. After our wedding, I noticed a drastic change in Sam's attitude toward me. The kind, supportive boyfriend I knew transformed into someone who spoke to me in a condescending tone. Before we got married, he had promised to help with household chores, knowing how busy I was with work. But after the wedding, everything changed. He began saying things like, "What will the neighbors think if they see a man hanging clothes? Housework is a woman's job." His words felt like a slap in the face. I was working hard, balancing my responsibilities, and he expected me to handle all the housework while he relaxed. No matter how busy I was, he never lifted a finger to help. Did he really think people cared if they saw a man hanging clothes? As the months passed, I began to feel increasingly trapped. The dreams I had of a supportive partner faded, replaced by the reality of my daily struggles. Sam's lack of involvement in our home life made me question everything about our marriage. I started to wonder if I had made a mistake by not standing up for myself earlier. Many times, I replayed moments from the beginning of our relationship in my mind, those times when I brushed off my concerns about his behavior, thinking he'd eventually change. Yet there I was, stuck in a situation that felt increasingly one-sided. The frustration I felt simmered beneath the surface, growing harder and harder to ignore. Eventually, I realized that the problem wasn't just Sam's attitude, but also my reluctance to assert my needs and boundaries. I had spent so much time trying to keep the peace that I ended up neglecting my own happiness. As I sat down to reflect on my life, I knew I needed to make a decision. I couldn't keep living in a marriage that felt so unbalanced. In the weeks that followed, I took time to organize my thoughts and consider my options. It was time to face the reality of my situation and decide what I wanted for my future. I needed to find a way to reclaim my voice and take back control of my life. As I approached my 33rd birthday, I felt an urgency to resolve these issues. I wanted to enter this new year of my life with clarity and purpose, no more putting my needs second. It was time to take charge and create the life I truly wanted, whether that meant finding a way to improve my marriage or, if necessary, walking away from it once and for all. I felt a mix of fear and excitement as I considered the possibilities ahead. This was my moment to redefine what happiness meant for me. I was determined to find a path forward, no matter how challenging the journey might be. After all, life was too short to settle for anything less than I deserved. As I took my first steps toward reclaiming my independence, I was filled with a new sense of determination. I decided it was time to have an honest conversation with Sam, one that might just define the future of our marriage. So I sat him down one evening after work. He seemed taken aback, sensing that this was more serious than our usual discussions. "Sam, we need to talk," I began, my voice steady but firm. "This isn't working for me anymore. I've been feeling unheard and overwhelmed, and I can't keep going like this." He furrowed his brows, clearly caught off guard. "What do you mean, Laura? I thought things were fine." I shook my head, fighting back the frustration that had built up over the years. "Things haven't been fine for a long time. I try to share the load, but you ignore my needs and expect me to carry everything alone. Work, home, finances, all of it. That's not a partnership." Sam looked away, as if searching for the right words. For a moment, I thought he might apologize or try to understand my perspective. But instead, he muttered, "You're just making a big deal out of nothing, Laura. This is how things are supposed to be. You work, I work. I help my parents, and you should just understand." It was like a slap in the face. I realized then that he had no intention of changing, no desire to see things from my point of view. It wasn't a matter of him not understanding. It was that he didn't care enough to try. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling more alone than ever before. I knew then that my decision had already been made, even if I hadn't said it out loud yet. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer and started the process of separating our finances and filing for divorce. I moved into a small apartment closer to my job, far from the house that now felt suffocating. It was hard at first, facing the reality that my marriage was over. But with every passing day, I felt a growing sense of freedom. Sam, on the other hand, couldn't seem to accept that I was serious. He called me incessantly, leaving voicemails pleading for me to come back, promising he'd change. But it was too late. I had given him so many chances, and he had dismissed them all. Now, it was time for me to prioritize myself. As the divorce proceedings moved forward, I learned that Sam had been struggling to keep up appearances with his family, especially with the financial support he had been sending them. When he realized I wasn't coming back, he became desperate, trying to salvage the life he had built on false promises. He even tried to turn his sister, Emily, against me, claiming I had abandoned him without reason. But Emily, once she understood the whole story, sided with me, realizing that her brother had been using my contributions to maintain a facade. The finalization of the divorce was a turning point. With the legal matters settled, I began to rebuild my life from the ground up. I took on new challenges at work, finally putting my focus back on my career. The projects that had once been sidelined now became my passion, and I thrived in the professional growth that came with my newfound energy and independence. Sam continued to reach out occasionally, each message a mixture of regret and anger, but I had made my peace. I no longer felt the urge to respond. I realized that his attempts to reconnect were rooted in his fear of being alone, not in genuine remorse for how he had treated me. It was his problem to solve, not mine. One evening, after a long day at the office, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, sipping a glass of wine as I watched the city lights twinkle. For the first time in years, I felt content, free from the burdens that had weighed me down. The peace was indescribable, a feeling I hadn't known I craved until I finally had it. Looking back, I understood that my journey wasn't just about leaving a marriage that no longer served me. It was about rediscovering who I was, what I wanted, and realizing that I deserved more than just being an afterthought in someone else's life. I had spent so much time trying to meet everyone else's expectations that I had forgotten my own dreams. As I turned 33, I made a promise to myself to never settle for less than I deserve again, to chase my ambitions without hesitation, and to never lose sight of my own worth. I knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but I also knew I had the strength to navigate whatever challenges came my way. And as I watched the sunset from my new home, I felt a sense of hope and determination that I hadn't felt in years. It was time to embrace the next chapter of my life, one that I would write on my own terms. A chapter where I could be truly happy, free, and unapologetically myself. Subscribe to the channel and click on the notification. Help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers. This way YouTube will deliver this content to more people who will benefit. I count on your help. Conclusion of the story. It concludes with the protagonist, Laura, finding peace and freedom after the end of her troubled marriage. After going through the entire divorce process and facing Sam's attempts at reconciliation, Laura decides to focus on herself and rebuild her life. The narrative ends with Laura reflecting on her new beginning, valuing her independence, and committing to never settling for less than she deserves, closing on a note of hope and self-confidence for the future.